Hi, this is Dr. Munsell. This is the first video, maybe the only video, we'll see how it goes, for our second day of Rhetoric of Tourism. This is June 4th, 2013. The time is approximately 2:56 and 47 seconds, 48, 49. I'm going to try to do a better job of following the PowerPoint this time. I know I sort of went back and forth for the very first day, and I also, since we're on this road, we're on this journey together. I don't want us to lose sight of all the various things that I discussed in light of framing the course yesterday, and so. All those various terms are still sort of with us, even though I won't use them today. But those magical Greek terms, again, arete, eudaimonia, teleological logic or teleology, and entelechy. And so go back and look at those, and hopefully you have a good sense of what this class is all about from all the various videos from the very first day. I think there were 5 in all that tried to go through the syllabus and the assignments, at least the first part of of our schedule together. And also I want to remind you that the first things that are due by tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., and those things are, it can be one thing actually, it could be an expanded email that summarizes all of the various assignments, so I can see that you understand what the assignments are, but also that summarizes your reading of your required reading for today, which are pages 1 through 22, and this is the stuff that I'll be talking about today. And then also, please, if you haven't done so, set up your Tumblr blog and also your Twitter, and then email me those email addresses, and so I can stick those on Koala Connection so we can see one another. And I've emailed you several times today already about issues of attendance and things like that. Okay, so I'm going to again try to be brief as possible. The second slide here after the introductory slide is just to think about memory, because in a sense this book is all about, obviously, the rhetoric of public memory. And so there's a little story at the beginning of the chapter that I'll let you read. I've actually mentioned this chapter or this story in lots of various classes, but take a look at that. And remember the 5 canons of rhetoric, which I'll get to in the next slide, but we are particularly focusing on one of them, memory, but all of them actually blur together. And then the 3 topoi of this book, and topoi here topoi traditionally meant plural for places. I think it's the plural. Topics, ways to find enthymemes to argue. But here it's basically like the key ideas or the key terms or concepts that we'll be dealing with. Again, and I've mentioned this before, rhetoric, memory, place, all sort of culminating in our understanding and our study of public memory. And then the argument of the entire book really is on page 1. And it's a pretty simple argument, but you might want to highlight that in your reading just for kicks and giggles. Basically, and it has a thesis here, it says the argument of this collection, however, is that within the contemporary moment, rhetoric, memory, and place form complex and important relations. So, that we're just sort of looking at all this stuff and how they work together. And then there's this larger justification at the end of the first section that simply calls for a rhetorical study of places of public memory, a rhetorical study of public memory. that's just, every sort of textbook is going to try to initially justify why it should exist in the first place. The next slide is backing up the canons of rhetoric, just so you remember what they are. You probably have been introduced to them in lots of different classes if you've taken my classes. If not, this stuff was probably at least implied in Column 100. Invention is sort of inventing the messages or the arguments that you want to use in your persuasive discourse, and that's generally what rhetoric was. Traditionally, the art of finding in any given situation the available means of persuasion, so said Father Aristotle. Organization, how we organize our messages, delivery, the nonverbal delivery style, word choice, oftentimes thinking in terms of tropes or figures of speech. And then, of course, what we're dealing with here, what is that? Memory. So those are the canons of rhetoric, just so you remember. And so we're not really, even though this is a very contemporary study of rhetoric, we still have the canons. They're always there. They never go away. And then the next stuff, I already sort of offered you sort of the old-fashioned idea of rhetoric, a sort of intentional persuasive discourse, oftentimes just looking at public speaking. But the new ideas about rhetoric make rhetoric unbelievably important. And I say this in lots of different classes, but the key terms here, before we get into some of the stuff in the textbook, rhetoric is epistemic, it's axiological, and it's ontological, which basically means that rhetoric helps us to know what we know, and indeed it's we know through a medium or a media. So it's both sort of the form, but also the knowledge. Axiological, discourse and rhetoric, craft, are ways of valuing things. Ontological, rhetoric crafts how we see our very sense of our being as a human being. So it creates sort of what we know, our social reality, and the means through which we sort of understand that social reality. It gives us, or offers us, or invites us to embrace certain values and not embrace other values, and it helps us to better understand, or crafts for us our understanding of our very being as individuals and communities in the universe. Yeah, you betcha. The next slide is really sort of what does our book say about rhetoric, so trying to define rhetoric. One of the things that it mentions is that rhetoric always has to do with the public, and so we're definitely dealing with issues of public issues, civic issues, community issues, even though there is a blur between private and public, and it's slippery, but they are particularly interested in issues of the public, not individual memory. I remember, I don't. What do I remember? I remembered that this morning I woke up. So it's more about public memory and how the public remembers certain things, and so so it's all about public. Next, it's a very broad view of rhetoric. So we're not necessarily dealing with old-fashioned speeches, though that's always going to be part of it. We're dealing with verbal and nonverbal. We're dealing with statues. We're dealing with little speeches that tour guides might give. We're dealing with boat rides. We're dealing with pamphlets. We're dealing with gift shops. All these things are rhetoric. And our authors are also concerned with what they call meaningful discourse, and they offer sort of two takes on the idea of meaningful. One thing is that it has affective weight, which basically means there's an emotional weight to it. It is meaningful from the perspective of it makes me feel something, whether it be pride, anger, whatever. And then the second way that they meaning is that rhetoric takes place through the material. That is, it is always mediated. That is, it is always through discourse. That's the idea of mediation. Rhetoric does not exist in the air. You know, messages are conveyed through an iPad or a book or a statue or something like that. These material things. That's the idea of meaningful through material, through mediation. So public, very broad view of rhetoric. We're not just dealing with speeches, and it's meaningful, especially emotional, but also it is always mediated. That is, it takes shape through these physical, material things, whether that could be language in and of itself. The next slide here, I'm already at 10 minutes. More on rhetoric. One of the things that our book says is that they're interested in rhetorical legibility. That is our ability to sort of decode what was meant, and that's always contextual. And sometimes we're not necessarily interested in intent, but there's something important about public memory where people need to have sort of a shared understanding of things. So they are interested in the legibility of such and such memorial or monument, etc. And rhetoric is partisan or always partial, which means it doesn't always tell the entire story. It tells part of the story. And because it tells part of the story, and because of that and several other things, it's always consequential. That means it has consequences. Creating a sense of public memory that valorizes Confederate soldiers is consequential for how we see the Civil War or the War of Northern Aggression. So it all has to do as well when it comes to consequences of who has power, who doesn't have power, who continues to have power, who continues not to have power, blah, 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 blah. And then the last paragraph just reemphasizes this idea that they're particularly interested in issues of public. And so when we're dealing with rhetoric, we're always thinking in terms of civic issues, even as and political issues, even as we're interested in public memory. And public memory is always going to be political and civic. So, quick review of what I just talked about. And then I'll give you sort of an example, but I'm not going to give you the answers because my job, I think, is never to give folks answers, but to just give students questions. You must go seek out the answer. Okay, so taking all that stuff I just said about rhetoric, what would be some critical probes or just some things that should always be in your head when you are engaging anything that is rhetoric or rhetorical, which again is broad. Anything that sort of invites us to see the world in a particular way. So what is a message? Like a memorial, a statue, a gift shop, a deck of cards from a gift shop, the little hats that you can buy. Teach us about how, teach us about social reality. How does it make or make things known? How do you, this hat educates me about this thing. It tells me this instead of this, and through this particular medium. What does that say? What values does it supply? What does it tell us about our various being, our very being as a human being? What does it say about public problems or issues? How does it make audiences feel? What is the affect? How does the medium or material or mediation impact all of the above? Constrain it, help it along. Are the messages clear, ambiguous? Are they easy to decode? Again, doing a Michelle Bachmann here because I'm looking at the slides. Easy to decode, what was intended, and most of the time, again, we don't care about intention. Sometimes we do, but it's much more interesting to see what people sort of interpret. How is the message